The cold Atlantic water pressed against Marcus Reed's wetsuit as he descended into the darkness, his flashlight cutting through the murky depths like a knife through silk. For 37 years he had been diving these waters, exploring every crevice, every underwater canyon, every forgotten corner of the seafloor that most people would never see. But today felt different. Today, the ocean seemed to be calling him toward something extraordinary, something that would transform everything he thought he knew about his life beneath the waves. Marcus had started his morning like any other, checking his equipment with a methodical precision that came from decades of experience. His diving boat, the Meridian, rocked gently in the harbor as he loaded his gear. The sky was clear, the sea conditions perfect, and his instincts told him that this expedition would be unlike any other. He had received a tip from an old fisherman about unusual sonar readings in a sector that remained largely unexplored, a region where the continental shelf dropped away into an abyss that few had dared to investigate. But before we dive deeper into this incredible discovery, if you're enjoying this story of underwater adventure and hidden treasure, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another amazing tale. And if you really want to support the channel and get exclusive behind-the-scenes content, consider becoming a member with super thanks. Your support helps us bring you more incredible stories like this one. Also, drop a comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching from. We love hearing from our global audience. Now, as Marcus descended past the 100-foot mark, the water around him transitioned from brilliant turquoise to deep indigo, then to an almost impenetrable darkness. His depth gauge showed 180 feet when his flashlight beam first caught something unusual. At first, he thought it might be a rock formation or perhaps a reef structure, but as he drew closer, his heart began to race. The shape was too regular, too purposeful to be natural. It was unmistakably man-made, and it was massive. The outline of a ship emerged from the gloom like a ghost materializing from another era. Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat, causing his regulator to bubble more frantically than usual. He forced himself to breathe slowly, to remain calm, to approach this discovery with the professionalism that had kept him alive through hundreds of dangerous dives. But inside, excitement surged through his veins like electricity. The vessel was enormous, far larger than he had initially estimated. As he swam along its port side, his flashlight revealed details that made his mind race with possibilities. The wood was dark and weathered, covered in marine growth and barnacles, but the structure remained remarkably intact. This was no modern shipwreck. The design, the construction methods, the ornate carvings that still remained visible beneath decades of ocean accumulation, everything pointed to a ship from another century. Marcus checked his air supply and dive computer. He had 30 minutes before he would need to begin his ascent, factoring in decompression stops. That gave him enough time for a preliminary exploration, just enough to understand what he had found and to determine whether this wreck warranted further investigation. Though deep down, he already knew the answer. This discovery was significant, potentially historic, and he needed to document everything he could before returning to the surface. The ship's deck had partially collapsed, creating openings that led into the interior of the vessel. Marcus positioned himself near what appeared to be the main cargo hatch, a large square opening that descended into absolute darkness. He paused, considering the risks. Penetrating a wreck was always dangerous, especially one of this age and in this condition. The structure could be unstable, and getting disoriented inside could prove fatal. But the pull of discovery was too strong, the mystery too compelling to resist. He secured a guideline to a stable portion of the deck, ensuring he would have a way to find his exit regardless of visibility conditions. Then, slowly and carefully, he descended into the cargo hold. His flashlight beam penetrated the darkness, illuminating particles of sediment that floated through the water like snow. The hold was cavernous, far larger than he had anticipated, and as his light swept across the interior, Marcus saw something that made him freeze in place. Wooden crates, dozens of them, were stacked throughout the cargo hold. Many had deteriorated over time, their contents spilling out onto the floor of the hold, but others remained remarkably intact. Marcus swam closer to one of the open crates, and what he saw inside made his heart pound so hard he could hear it in his ears. Gold coins, hundreds of them, glinted in his flashlight beam. They were scattered across the floor of the hold like confetti, mixed with what appeared to be silver bars and other precious metals. But that was just the beginning. As Marcus explored further into the hold, his flashlight revealed treasures that seemed to belong in a museum rather than at the bottom of the ocean. There were ornate jewelry pieces, their gemstones still brilliant despite their time underwater. Religious artifacts crafted from gold and silver, their intricate designs suggesting they were created by master craftsmen. Ceramic vessels that appeared to be of Asian origin, their glazed surfaces still vibrant. And everywhere he looked, more gold coins, more precious metals, more items of incalculable value. Marcus's hands trembled as he reached out to touch one of the gold bars. It was real, solid, impossibly heavy even in the water. This wasn't some small personal treasure or a modest cargo of trade goods. This was a fortune, a literal king's ransom that had been resting on the ocean floor for what appeared to be well over a century. The implications were staggering. If he reported this find, it would attract archaeologists, historians, treasure hunters, government agencies, and countless others who would want a piece of this discovery. He checked his dive computer again. Time was running short, and he needed to begin his ascent soon. But before leaving, Marcus used his underwater camera to document everything he could see. He photographed the exterior of the wreck, the cargo hold entrance, and as many of the treasures as possible. Each image would serve as proof of this incredible discovery, evidence that would help him establish his claim to the find and navigate the complex legal and practical challenges that lay ahead. As he began his ascent, following his guideline back out of the hold and up toward the surface, Marcus's mind raced with possibilities and concerns. This discovery would change his life, of that he was certain. But would it be for better or worse? Treasure discoveries rarely remained simple. They attracted attention, both wanted and unwanted. They sparked disputes over ownership and salvage rights. They brought out the worst in people, transforming friends into competitors and creating enemies where none had existed before. Breaking the surface, Marcus removed his regulator and drew in deep breaths of fresh air. The world above the water seemed almost surreal after what he had just witnessed below. The sun was bright, the sky still clear, and everything appeared exactly as it had when he descended nearly an hour ago. But Marcus knew that nothing would ever be the same. He had just made the discovery of a lifetime, and now he had to decide what to do about it. Climbing aboard the Meridian, Marcus stripped off his gear with practiced efficiency. His hands still shook slightly, whether from the cold water or the adrenaline coursing through his system, he couldn't be sure. He immediately reviewed the photographs on his camera, wanting to confirm that what he had seen was real and not some nitrogen narcosis-induced hallucination. But there they were, clear and undeniable, images of a treasure that would make headlines around the world. Marcus knew he needed to be careful about who he told and how he proceeded. His first instinct was to contact his old friend and occasional diving partner, James Chen, who had connections in the maritime archaeology community. But he hesitated. Once word got out, the location of the wreck would become impossible to keep secret. Satellite tracking, automatic identification systems, and the simple fact that the Meridian had been logged as leaving the harbor that morning meant that his movements could be traced. Anyone with resources and determination could figure out where he had been diving. Instead of immediately making calls, Marcus decided to return to shore and think through his options. He started the Meridian's engines and began the journey back to the harbor, his mind constantly replaying what he had seen in that cargo hold. The gold alone would be worth millions, but the historical artifacts, the jewelry, the religious items, their value was almost impossible to estimate. This was the kind of find that museums competed for, that governments claimed as national heritage, that private collectors would pay fortunes to acquire. The trip back to shore took 40 minutes, giving Marcus time to consider his next moves. He needed legal advice, that much was certain. Maritime salvage law was complex, varying by country and depending on factors like where the wreck was located, whether it was in international waters or within a nation's territorial boundaries, and whether the ship and its cargo could be definitively identified. He also needed security. Once word got out about the discovery, the wreck site would become a target for less scrupulous treasure hunters who might not respect legal claims or proper archaeological protocols. Docking the Meridian, Marcus secured his boat and carried his gear to his truck. The harbor was quiet, with only a few other fishermen and recreational boaters around, none of whom paid him any particular attention. He drove home, a small house overlooking the ocean that he had purchased decades ago with money saved from commercial diving contracts. It was modest but comfortable, filled with maritime memorabilia and photographs from his countless diving expeditions. Once inside, Marcus uploaded the photographs from his camera to his computer and backed them up to multiple cloud storage services. He wanted to ensure that even if something happened to his physical equipment, evidence of the discovery would remain secure. As the images populated his screen, he studied them more carefully, looking for any details that might help identify the ship or its origin. One photograph showed a partially intact ship's bell, still mounted near what had once been the wheelhouse. The inscription was difficult to read through the marine growth, but Marcus could make out what appeared to be a date, 1887. Another image captured a portion of a wooden crate with faded lettering that might have indicated the cargo's destination or origin. These clues would be valuable for researchers trying to establish the ship's identity and history. Marcus spent the rest of the afternoon researching maritime salvage law and trying to determine the wreck's likely position relative to territorial waters. His GPS logs from the dive showed that the site was approximately 15 nautical miles from shore, which might place it in international waters depending on how territorial boundaries were measured in that particular region. That could work in his favor, potentially simplifying the legal situation, but it also meant less protection against other salvagers who might try to claim the wreck. As evening approached, Marcus finally made a call. He contacted Martin Bradford, a maritime lawyer who had helped him navigate a salvage dispute years earlier when he had recovered equipment from a modern cargo ship that had sunk during a storm. Bradford was expensive but knowledgeable, and more importantly, Marcus trusted him to be discreet about sensitive matters. The conversation was brief but productive. Bradford asked pointed questions about the wreck's location, Marcus's documentation of the find, and whether anyone else knew about the discovery. He advised Marcus to file a salvage claim immediately, to establish legal rights to the wreck and its contents before others could stake competing claims. He also recommended hiring a professional archaeological team to conduct a proper survey and recovery operation, both to ensure valuable historical information wasn't lost and to strengthen Marcus's legal position by demonstrating responsible stewardship of the find. After ending the call, Marcus sat in his study, looking out at the darkening ocean. The water that had been his workplace and playground for nearly 4 decades now held a secret that could transform his life. He thought about the ship resting on the ocean floor, about the people who had built it and sailed on it, about the circumstances that had led to its sinking and the loss of its valuable cargo. Every wreck told a story, and this one would prove to be more compelling than most. The following morning, Marcus woke before dawn, his sleep having been restless and filled with dreams of underwater treasures and shipwrecks. He made coffee and checked his email, finding a message from Bradford with attached documents for filing a salvage claim. The lawyer had worked through the night to prepare the necessary paperwork, recognizing the time-sensitive nature of the situation. Marcus reviewed the documents carefully, then signed and submitted them electronically to the appropriate maritime authorities. With the legal process initiated, Marcus turned his attention to the practical aspects of salvage operations. He would need a larger boat or potentially a salvage vessel with proper equipment for recovering heavy cargo from depth. He would need a team of experienced divers who could be trusted to work professionally and keep the operation confidential. He would need security to monitor the wreck site and prevent unauthorized salvaging. All of this would require substantial capital, far more than Marcus had readily available. Bradford had anticipated this problem and had included in his email a list of potential investors and salvage companies that might be interested in funding the operation in exchange for a percentage of the recovered treasure. Marcus studied the list, recognizing some of the names from his years in the diving industry. Some were reputable operations with solid track records, while others had more questionable reputations. Choosing the right partners would be crucial, as the wrong investors could turn this opportunity into a nightmare of disputes and competing interests. Marcus spent the next several days conducting due diligence on potential partners and beginning to assemble a team. He contacted James Chen, finally sharing the news of his discovery with his old friend. Chen's reaction was exactly what Marcus had expected: initial disbelief, followed by excitement, followed by a stream of questions about the wreck and its contents. Chen agreed to join the salvage team, bringing with him decades of diving experience and a reputation for professionalism that would lend credibility to the operation. Next, Marcus reached out to Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, a maritime archaeologist he had worked with years earlier on a research expedition. Dr. Morgan specialized in ships from the late 19th century and had published extensively on trade routes and cargo manifests from that era. When Marcus sent her the photographs from the wreck, her response was almost instantaneous. She recognized several of the artifacts as consistent with cargo that would have been transported along specific trade routes during the 1880s, and she identified some of the coins as Spanish colonial pieces that had remained in circulation well into the late 19th century. Dr. Morgan was eager to be involved in the project, seeing it as a once-in-a-career opportunity to study a largely intact shipwreck from that period. She agreed to lead the archaeological survey of the site, ensuring that the recovery operation would be conducted according to professional standards and that valuable historical data would be properly documented and preserved. Her involvement would also help legitimize the operation in the eyes of academic institutions and government agencies that might otherwise be skeptical of a commercially motivated salvage effort. For funding, Marcus ultimately decided to partner with Oceanic Salvage Corporation, a well-established company based in Florida that specialized in deep-water recovery operations. After extensive negotiations facilitated by Bradford, they agreed to a deal where Oceanic would provide the vessel, equipment, and operational funding in exchange for 40% of the recovered treasure's net value. It wasn't ideal. Marcus would have preferred to retain a larger share, but it was realistic given his need for substantial resources and the company's willingness to move quickly. 3 weeks after Marcus's initial discovery, the salvage operation officially began. Oceanic's salvage vessel, the Endeavour, arrived at the coordinates Marcus had provided, accompanied by a security boat that would maintain a perimeter around the site. The Endeavour was equipped with state-of-the-art diving equipment, underwater remotely operated vehicles, and a dynamic positioning system that allowed it to remain stable over the wreck site even in challenging sea conditions. The first phase of the operation involved a comprehensive survey of the wreck and its surrounding area. Dr. Morgan led a team of archaeologists and divers who methodically photographed and documented every visible aspect of the ship. They used sonar to create detailed three-dimensional maps of the wreck structure, identifying areas that were structurally sound and others that posed collapse risks. They also surveyed the debris field around the wreck, discovering that portions of the cargo had spilled out onto the seafloor when the ship sank, creating a scattered trail of artifacts that extended for hundreds of feet. During this survey phase, the team made several important discoveries that helped establish the ship's identity. They located the ship's nameplate, which identified the vessel as the Santa Mariana, a merchant ship that had departed from Manila in December 1887 bound for San Francisco. Historical records indicated that the Santa Mariana had disappeared during a storm in January 1888, along with its crew of 43 and a cargo valued at what would be tens of millions of dollars in modern currency. The ship had been carrying trade goods from Asia, including porcelain, silk, and a substantial quantity of gold and silver that was being transported to banks in California. The discovery that the wreck was the Santa Mariana added an important historical dimension to the salvage operation. The ship's disappearance had been one of the maritime mysteries of its time, with its exact location and the fate of its crew never definitively established. Now, more than a century later, those questions would finally be answered. Dr. Morgan and her team documented evidence suggesting that the ship had likely foundered during the storm, possibly striking an underwater rock formation that had torn open its hull, causing it to sink rapidly before the crew could launch lifeboats or send distress signals. With the survey complete, the operation moved to the recovery phase. This was delicate, dangerous work that required exceptional skill and patience. The divers couldn't simply swim into the cargo hold and begin hauling out treasure. The wreck was fragile, its structural integrity compromised by more than a century of exposure to salt water and ocean currents. Any careless movement could cause collapses that would not only endanger the divers but also damage or destroy the very artifacts they were trying to recover. The team developed a systematic approach, working from the upper levels of the cargo hold downward. They used specialized lifting bags to carefully raise crates and heavy items to the surface, where they were received by the Endeavour's crew and immediately documented and preserved. Each item was photographed in situ before being moved, creating a comprehensive archaeological record that would be invaluable for researchers studying the wreck and its contents. The gold coins were particularly challenging to recover. Thousands of them were scattered throughout the hold and across the seafloor, mixed with sediment and debris. The team used underwater vacuum systems to collect the coins, carefully screening the sediment to ensure that no pieces were lost. Each day's recovery was meticulously catalogued, with running tallies kept of the quantity and types of items being brought to the surface. As the days turned into weeks, the magnitude of the treasure became increasingly apparent. The initial estimates of the cargo's value proved to be conservative. The gold and silver alone was worth millions, but the true value lay in the rare and historically significant artifacts that emerged from the cargo hold. There were pieces of jewelry that had belonged to wealthy merchants or colonial officials, crafted with extraordinary skill and featuring precious gems that retained their brilliance despite their underwater sojourn. There were religious artifacts of gold and silver, including ornate crosses, chalices, and statues that had likely been commissioned for churches in the Americas. There were hundreds of pieces of Chinese porcelain, many intact and representing some of the finest examples of late Qing dynasty craftsmanship. But with success came complications. Despite the security measures in place, word of the salvage operation had leaked out, attracting unwanted attention. Media helicopters began circling the site, filming the Endeavour and its activities. Boats carrying curious onlookers and amateur treasure hunters approached the security perimeter, hoping to catch a glimpse of the recovered treasures. More concerning were the credible reports that a rival salvage company was preparing to challenge Marcus's claim to the wreck, arguing that his salvage filing had procedural defects and that the wreck site was actually within territorial waters, giving the government priority rights to the cargo. Bradford assured Marcus that his claim was solid and that any legal challenges would ultimately fail, but the uncertainty created stress and tension within the operation. The Oceanic Salvage Corporation began pushing for faster recovery work, worried that a court might order operations suspended while legal disputes were resolved. This pressure led to disagreements with Dr. Morgan, who insisted on maintaining archaeological standards even if it meant slower progress. Marcus found himself in the uncomfortable position of mediator, trying to balance commercial imperatives against academic integrity and his own desire to ensure that this historic wreck was treated with appropriate respect. He had long conversations with Dr. Morgan, explaining the financial realities that made it impossible to proceed at a purely academic pace, and equally lengthy discussions with Oceanic's representatives, emphasizing that cutting corners would not only be professionally irresponsible but could also damage the operation's public image and potentially weaken their legal position. A compromise was reached where the team would prioritize recovering the most valuable and historically significant items first, ensuring that even if operations were suspended, the most important artifacts would be secured. The more common items and the ship's structural components could be recovered more quickly and with less archaeological documentation, accepting that some scholarly detail would be sacrificed for practical necessity. This adjusted approach proved effective. Over the following weeks, the team successfully recovered the bulk of the treasure from the Santa Mariana. The Endeavour's hold filled with crates of coins, bars of precious metals, and carefully packed containers protecting the delicate porcelain and jewelry. Each day's recovery was documented in detailed logs and photographs, creating a record that would satisfy both legal requirements and academic standards. The operation's success brought new challenges. Once the recovered items were brought to shore, they needed to be properly conserved, catalogued, and secured. Oceanic arranged for the treasure to be transported to a secure facility where conservation specialists could begin the painstaking work of removing salt deposits, stabilizing fragile materials, and preparing the artifacts for eventual sale or display. This process would take months, possibly years, for some of the more delicate items. Meanwhile, the legal situation grew more complex. The government filed a formal claim to the wreck and its contents, arguing that the Santa Mariana had been registered in the United States and that its cargo therefore belonged to the federal government as successor to the ship's original insurers. A group of descendants of the Santa Mariana's crew filed a separate claim, asserting that they were entitled to the treasure as heirs of the men who had died when the ship sank. Even the government of the Philippines entered the dispute, claiming that artifacts of Asian origin should be repatriated to their country of manufacture. Bradford assembled a legal team to fight these claims, confident that maritime law supported Marcus's right to the treasure as the salvor who had located and recovered it. But he also advised preparing for a lengthy legal battle that could stretch on for years. In the meantime, the treasure would likely remain in the custody of the court, with its ultimate disposition dependent on judicial decisions that could go in any number of directions. Despite these complications, Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction about what he and his team had accomplished. They had located a lost piece of maritime history, recovered treasures that would fascinate and educate future generations, and done so while maintaining professional and archaeological standards. Whatever happened with the legal disputes and the eventual distribution of the treasure, Marcus knew that he had been part of something extraordinary. The media attention surrounding the salvage operation made Marcus a minor celebrity in the diving and maritime communities. He gave interviews to newspapers and magazines, appeared on television documentaries, and was invited to speak at conferences and symposiums. He handled this newfound fame with characteristic modesty, always emphasizing the team effort that had made the recovery possible and the historical significance of the find rather than its monetary value. Dr. Morgan used the publicity to advance understanding of 19th-century maritime trade and the hazards that ships faced during that era. She published papers analyzing the Santa Mariana's cargo and what it revealed about trade networks connecting Asia, the Americas, and Europe. The artifacts recovered from the wreck became the subject of exhibitions at major museums, attracting hundreds of thousands of visitors curious to see treasures that had been hidden beneath the ocean for more than a century. As the months passed and the legal proceedings ground forward, Marcus returned to his regular diving work. He still loved being underwater, still felt that profound sense of peace and connection that came from exploring the ocean's depths. But he approached each dive with a new awareness of the history that lay beneath the waves, the countless ships and cargoes and human stories that rested on the seafloor, waiting for someone to discover them and bring them back to light. The Santa Mariana case eventually settled after nearly 2 years of negotiations. The court ruled that Marcus and Oceanic were entitled to retain the majority of the treasure, with the government receiving a percentage as compensation for territorial claims and the descendants of the crew receiving a smaller share as a humanitarian gesture. The Philippines dropped its repatriation claim in exchange for having several significant artifacts placed on long-term loan to museums in Manila. When the dust settled and the final accounting was completed, Marcus's share of the treasure came to just over $14 million. After taxes and payment of legal fees, he netted approximately $8 million, a sum that would have been unimaginable to him when he first started diving as a young man. But the money, while certainly life-changing, wasn't what he remembered most about the experience. What stayed with Marcus was the thrill of discovery, the moment when his flashlight first illuminated those gold coins scattered across the cargo hold floor. It was the satisfaction of being part of a team that had worked together to accomplish something remarkable. It was the knowledge that he had helped preserve an important piece of history and made it accessible to people who would never have the opportunity to explore the ocean depths themselves. Marcus used a portion of his treasure proceeds to upgrade his diving equipment and purchase a better boat, one capable of reaching more remote dive sites and supporting longer expeditions. He established a small foundation to fund maritime archaeological research and to provide scholarships for young people interested in careers in diving and oceanography. And he continued to explore, always searching for the next discovery, the next mystery waiting to be solved beneath the waves. The Santa Mariana wreck site eventually became a protected archaeological preserve, with recreational diving permitted but recovery of artifacts prohibited. Marcus visited the site several times after the salvage operation concluded, swimming through the cargo hold that he had first entered on that fateful day. The hold was empty now, its treasures removed and preserved in museums and private collections around the world. But the ship itself remained, a monument to the mariners who had sailed her and a testament to the ocean's power to both conceal and preserve history. Years later, when people asked Marcus about finding the Santa Mariana, he would smile and describe it as the culmination of a lifetime spent underwater. He would talk about the importance of persistence, of following hunches and intuition, of being prepared to recognize opportunity when it presented itself. But he would also emphasize that the real treasure wasn't the gold or the artifacts or the money. The real treasure was the experience itself, the adventure of discovery, and the privilege of being the person who brought a lost piece of history back to the world. The ocean, Marcus would say, holds countless secrets, treasures beyond imagination waiting for those brave and determined enough to seek them out. His discovery of the Santa Mariana proved that even in an age of satellite mapping and advanced technology, the depths could still surprise us, could still yield wonders that challenged our assumptions and expanded our understanding of the past. And for a veteran diver who had spent his life exploring those depths, that knowledge was more valuable than all the gold in a cargo hold. If this story of underwater discovery and incredible fortune inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. We've got so many more amazing true stories coming your way. Show your support by leaving a super thanks, which helps us continue creating this content for treasure hunting and diving enthusiasts like you. And we'd love to know, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments below, and let's see how far our community reaches. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey into the depths. Until next time, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and never stop searching for your own treasure beneath the waves.